Hi guys, I know that you're studying the moon right now in science, and I'm down in Texas at the Johnson Space Center, and I wanted to show you a couple cool things that they have in their display on the moon right here. So I'm going to show you a mock-up of a rocket that got us to the moon. So this rocket right here is called the Saturn V rocket, and this rocket got us to the moon. It was a very big rocket. And in the late 60s, when President John F. Kennedy was in the White House, he told America that we were going to the moon, and this Saturn V rocket got us there. I'm going to show you something else that's pretty cool over here.
Yeah, right.
Before we went to the moon, we needed to get to space to begin with. And the program to get us into space was called the Mercury. This would be a spacecraft that kind of looks like a triangle shape. And if you look inside, it only had room for one person. Now, if you look, that person right there, his knees are pointing upwards. And he looks like he's upside down, but in space, there's no up and down. So he wouldn't feel bad like you would feel in a roller coaster if you were positioned in that way. This thing went around Earth, and they have their Earth over here. Went around Earth and came back down and splashed into the ocean. And when it did come back down, you see the red on the bottom. That would simulate it heating up in the atmosphere, getting really, really hot, and it would splash down in the ocean. The name of the moon missions was called Apollo, and there was many Apollo missions. This is a simulator of the spacecraft that made it to the moon surface. And two names that you should be aware of is Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong. And they're the two astronauts that actually got to walk on the moon for the first time. So you see very simple joystick controls, kind of like a video game. And this module came off from another spaceship that was orbiting the moon, and this module was able to land on the moon's surface. And what's interesting about the moon is that it has a lot less gravity than the Earth. So astronauts, you see them bouncing on the surface of the moon. That's because the gravity is less. But they always fall back towards the surface because there is gravity. This would be an Apollo capsule right here. So you see the shape of it. And 3 astronauts were able to lay down. And you see one of them's right there. And this actual capsule is a mock-up of the last command module that landed on the moon. And the astronaut, Eugene Cernan, is the last astronaut to have walked on the moon, and he just died. But the way that this is shaped, it will fall back through the atmosphere, get very hot, and splash into the ocean. And you can see all the controls that they had to operate in order to make sure that this spacecraft worked for them. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, they had a famous saying that you're going to hear as you get older. This is one small step for man, one giant step for mankind. When they landed on the moon, it was a huge deal. No other country attempted this. As they walked around on the moon, they realized walking was fairly difficult. They kind of had to hop, skip. You see one of the astronauts had red stripes on his suit. That was to identify the difference between the two men. And it also identifies the commander. This Lunar Rover right here that you see is different from normal cars that we have on Earth. It has to be able to withstand the forces involved. It has to also be able be pretty compact to fit in the rocket. The wheels, it's hard for you to see, are a lot different. They're going to be mesh wheels, not rubber wheels that we have on our cars, because the lunar surface is very sandy, very silty, and they needed to, they didn't need to be very heavy like rubber, but it also needed to get through that silty sand. So these tires are actually kind of a mesh. And you see that umbrella looking like thing on top of the Lunar Rover, and that would be a communication device. You see that blue circle in the background? That's actually how they saw Earth as they were walking on the moon. They did a lot of sampling on the moon, collected a lot of rocks, and tried to study. We are now studying the geology of the moon and finding out that the moon is rich in different elements and minerals that we need on Earth. All right, let's go into the vault and we can see some actual moon rocks.
I can see her face.
Right here, you're able to actually touch a moon rock. Very smooth. It's from the moon. Brought back by Apollo 17. Let me show you some other things. When they brought the moon rocks back, they had to put them in these chambers to make sure that they stayed preserved as they analyzed them. They would wear these white suits called bunny suits, and they'd stick their hands in these black gloves in a temperature-controlled environment, doing different chemistry experiments, finding out what type of elements were in these rocks, and if we could use any of these elements on Earth, these minerals. These are the core samples that they took from the ground when they were on the moon. These are actual moon samples right here in this display. You can see all the science that has to go into uncovering what's in these rocks. There's oxygen in the rocks. There's silicon, titanium, aluminum, iron, magnesium, calcium, and other trace elements. This kind of shows you what those elements look like. And there's this lunar soil, which is that soil we talked about with the tires, trying to get through that soil. Very silty, very fine, difficult to drive the rover through. And these are different big compounds that they found in the rocks. To get astronauts to the moon, we need what's called mission control. And this is where a bunch of engineers would sit down and they would guide the rockets to the moon. You can tell they're very simplified computers.